Chapter 2, Part 5 of To Let. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Simon Evers. The Forsyte Saga 3, To Let by John Galsworthy. Part 2, Chapter 5, Purely Forsyte Affairs. Soames, coming up to the city with the intention of calling in at Green Street at the end of his day and taking Fleur back home with him, suffered from rumination. Sleeping partner that he was, he seldom visited the city now, but he still had a room of his own at Cuthcott, Kingston and Forsyte's, and one special clerk and a half assigned to the management of purely Forsyte affairs. They were somewhat in flux just now, an auspicious moment for the disposal of house property, and Soames was unloading the estates of his father and Uncle Roger, and to some extent of his Uncle Nicholas. His shrewd and matter-of-course probity in all money concerns had made him something of an autocrat in connection with these trusts. If Soames thought this or thought that, one had better save oneself the bother of thinking too. He guaranteed, as it were, irresponsibility to numerous Forsytes of the third and fourth generations. His fellow trustees, such as his cousins Roger or Nicholas, his cousins-in-law Tweetyman and Spender, or his sister Cicely's husband, all trusted him. He signed first, and where he signed first they signed after, and nobody was a penny the worse. Just now they were all a good many pennies the better, and Soames was beginning to see the close of certain trusts, except for distribution of the income from securities as gilt-edged as was compatible with the period. Passing the more feverish parts of the city toward the most perfect backwater in London, he ruminated. Money was extraordinarily tight, morality extraordinarily loose. The war had done it. Banks were not lending, people breaking contracts all over the place. There was a feeling in the air, and a look on faces that he did not like. The country seemed in for a spell of gambling and bankruptcies. There was satisfaction in the thought that neither he nor his trusts had an investment which could be affected by anything less maniacal than national repudiation or a levy on capital. If Soames had faith, it was in what he called English common sense, or the power to have things, if not one way, then another. He might, like his father James before him, say he didn't know what things were coming to, but he never in his heart believed they were. If it rested with him, they wouldn't, and after all he was only an Englishman like any other, so quietly tenacious of what he had that he knew he would never really part with it without something more or less equivalent in exchange. His mind was essentially equilibristic in material matters, and his way of putting the national situation difficult to refute in a world composed of human beings. Take his own case, for example. He was well off. Did that do anybody harm? He did not eat 10 meals a day. He ate no more than, perhaps not so much as, a poor man. He spent no money on vice, breathed no more air, used no more water to speak of than the mechanic or the porter. He certainly had pretty things about him, but they had given employment in the making, and somebody must use them. He bought pictures, but art must be encouraged. He was, in fact, an accidental channel through which money flowed, employing labour. What was there objectionable in that? In his charge money was in quicker and more useful flux than it would be in charge of the state and a lot of slow-fly, money-sucking officials. And as to what he saved each year, it was just as much in flux as what he didn't save, going into water board or council stocks or something sound and useful. The state paid him no salary for being trustee of his own or other people's money. He did all that for nothing. Therein lay the whole case against nationalization. Owners of private property were unpaid, and yet had every incentive to quicken up the flux. Under nationalization, just the opposite. In a country smarking from officialism, he felt that he had a strong case. It particularly annoyed him, entering that backwater of perfect peace, to think that a lot of unscrupulous trusts and combinations had been cornering the market in goods of all kinds and keeping prices at an artificial height. Such abusers of the individualistic system were the ruffians who caused all the trouble, and it was some satisfaction to see them getting into a stew at fast, lest the whole thing might come down with a run and land them in the soup. The offices of Cuthbert, Kingston, and Forsyte occupied the ground and first floors of a house on the right-hand side, and, ascending to his room, Soames thought, "Time we had a coat of paint." His old clerk, Gradman, was seated where he always was, at a huge bureau with countless pigeon-holes. Half the clerk stood beside him, with a broker's note recording investment of the proceeds from sale of the Bryanston Square house in Roger Forsyte's estate. Soames took it and said, "Vancouver City stock. It's down to-day." With a sort of grating ingratiation, old Gradman answered him, "Yes, but everything's down, Mr. Soames." And half the clerk withdrew. Soames skewered the document onto a number of other papers and hung up his hat. "I want to look at my will and marriage settlement, Gradman." Old Gradman, moving to the limit of his swivel chair, drew out 2 drafts from the bottom left-hand drawer. Recovering his body, he raised his grizzle-haired face, very red from stooping. "Copies, sir?" Soames took them. It struck him suddenly how like Gradman was to the stout brindled yard dog they had been wont to keep on his chain at the shelter, till one day Fleur had come and insisted it should be let loose, so that it had at once bitten the cook and been destroyed. If you let Gradman off his chain, would he bite the cook? Checking this frivolous fancy, Soames unfolded his marriage settlement. He had not looked at it for over 18 years, not since he remade his will when his father died and Fleur was born. He wanted to see whether the words "during coverture" were in. Yes, they were. Odd expression when you thought of it, and derived perhaps from horse breeding. Interest on £15,000, which he paid her without deducting income tax, so long as she remained his wife, and afterward, during widowhood, dum casta, old-fashioned and rather pointed words put in to ensure the conduct of Fleur's mother. His will made it up to an annuity of 1,000 under the same conditions. All right. He returned the copies to Gradman, who took them without looking up, swung the chair, restored the papers to their drawer, and went on casting up. "Gradman, I don't like the condition of the country. There are a lot of people about without any common sense. I want to find a way by which I can safeguard Miss Fleur against anything which might arise." Gradman wrote the figure 2 on his blotting paper. "Yes," he said, "there's a nasty spirit." "The ordinary restraint against anticipation doesn't meet the case." "No," said Gradman. "Suppose those Labour fellows come in, or worse. It's these people with fixed ideas who are the danger. Look at Ireland." "Ah," said Gradman. "Suppose I were to make a settlement on her at once, with myself as beneficiary for life. They couldn't take anything but the interest from me, unless, of course, they alter the law." Gradman moved his head and smiled. He said, they wouldn't do that." "I don't know," muttered Soames. "I don't trust them." "It'll take 2 years, sir, to be valid against death duties." Soames sniffed. 2 years? He was only 65. "That's not the point. Draw a form of settlement that passes all my property to Miss Fleur's children in equal shares, with antecedent life interests first to myself and then to her, without power of anticipation, and add a clause that in the event of anything happening to divert her life interest, that interest passes to the trustees to apply for her benefit in their absolute discretion." Gradman grated. "Rather extreme at your age, sir. You lose control." "That's my business," said Soames sharply. Gradman wrote on a piece of paper, "Life interest, anticipation, divert interest, absolute discretion," and said, "What trustees? There's young Mr. Kingston. He's a nice, steady young fellow." "Yes, he might do for one. I must have 3. There isn't a Forsyte now who appeals to me." "Not young Mr. Nicholas. He's at the bar. We've given him briefs." "He'll never set the Thames on fire," said Soames. A smile oozed out of Grabman's face, greasy from countless mutton chops, the smile of a man who sits all day. "You can't expect it at his age, Mr. Soames." "Why, what is he, 40? "Yes, quite a young fellow." "Well, put him in. But I want somebody who'll take a personal interest. There's no one that I can see. What about Mr. Valerius, now he's come home?" "Val darted with that father?" "Well," murmured Grabman, he has been dead 7 years. The statute runs against him." "No," said Soames, "I don't like the connection." He rose. Grabman said suddenly, "If they were making a levy on capital, they could come on down on the trustees, sir. So there you'd be just the same. I'd think it over, if I were you." "That's true," said Soames. "I will. What have you done about that dilapidation notice in Vere Street?" "I haven't served it yet. The party's very old. She won't want to go out at her age." "I don't know. This spirit of unrest touches everyone." "Still, I'm looking at things broadly, sir. She's 81. "Better serve it," said Soames, "and see what she says. Oh, and Mr. Timothy? Is everything in order in case of—" "I've got the inventory of his estate already. Had the furniture and pictures valued, so we know what reserves to put on. I shall be sorry when he goes, though. Dear me, it is a time since I first saw Mr. Timothy." "We can't live for ever," said Soames, taking down his hat. "No," said Grabman, "but it'll be a pity, the last of the old family. Shall I take up the matter of that nuisance in Old Compton Street? Those organs, they're nasty things." "Do. I must call for Miss Fleur and catch the 4 o'clock. Good day, Grabman." "Good day, Mr. Soames. I hope Miss Fleur—"
"Well enough, but gads about too much."
"Yes," grated Grabman, "she's young." Soames went out, musing. "Old Grabman! If he were younger, I'd put him in the trust. There's nobody I can depend on to take a real interest." Leaving the bilious and mathematical exactitude, the preposterous peace of that backwater, he thought suddenly, "During coverture? Why can't they exclude fellows like Profond instead of a lot of hard-working Germans?" and was surprised at the depth of uneasiness which could provoke so unpatriotic a thought. But there it was. One never got a moment of real peace. There was always something at the back of everything. And he made his way towards Green Street. 2 hours later by his watch, Thomas Grabman, stirring in his swivel chair, closed the last drawer of his bureau, and putting into his waistcoat pocket a bunch of keys so fat that they gave him a protuberance on the liver side, brushed his old top hat round with his sleeve, took his umbrella, and descended. Thick, short, and buttoned closely into his old frock coat, he walked towards Covent Garden Market. He never missed that daily promenade to the Tube for Highgate, and seldom some critical transaction on the way in connection with vegetables and fruit. Generations might be born, and hats might change, wars be fought, and Forsytes fade away. But Thomas Grabman, faithful and grey, would take his daily walk and buy his daily vegetable. Times were not what they were, and his son had lost a leg, and they never gave him those nice little plaited baskets to carry the stuff in now, and these tubes were convenient things. Still, he mustn't complain. His health was good, considering his time of life, and after 54 years in the law, he was getting around 800 a year, and a little worried of late, because it was mostly collector's commission on the rents, and with all this conversion of Forsyte property going on, it looked like drying up, and the price of living still so high. But it was no good worrying. The good God made us all, as he was in the habit of saying. Still, house property in London, he didn't know what Mr. Roger or Mr. James would say if they could see it being sold like this. It seemed to show a lack of faith. But Mr. Soames, he worried. Life and lives in being, and 21 years after. Beyond that you couldn't go. Still, he kept his health wonderfully. And Miss Fleur was a pretty little thing. She was. She'd marry. But lots of people had no children nowadays. He had had his first child at 22, and Mr. Jolyon, married while he was at Cambridge, had his child the same year. Gracious Peter! That was back in '69, a long time before old Mr. Jolyon, fine judge of property, had taken his will away from Mr. James. Dear, yes. Those were the days when they were buying property right and left, and none of this carky and falling over one another to get out of things, and cucumbers at twopence, and a melon, the old melons that made your mouth water. 50 years since he went into Mr. James's office, and Mr. James had said to him, "Now, Grabman, you're only a shaver. You pay attention, and you'll make your 500 a year before you're done." And he had, and feared God, and served the Forsytes, and kept a vegetable diet at night. And, buying a copy of John Bull, not that he approved of it, an extravagant affair, he entered the tube elevator with his mere brown-papered parcel, and was borne down into the bowels of the earth. End of Part 2, Chapter 5. Recording by Simon Evers.